Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Lawrence City Commission meeting. We've got a few, actually more than a few proclamations this evening. So we'll start with the first, which is the Scouting for Food proclamation. We entertain the scouts to come in and have a word, and then we'll read the proclamation.
Hello.
Hello.
I represent Boy Scouts of America. I'm Oliver Reed. I just wanted to say a few words about Scouting for Food. We've been doing this for 31 years, and we go around and we put flyers on people's doors, and we put them around, and we collect food for people that are hungry and the people who are in need.
Thank you, Oliver. I'm going to read the proclamation real briefly here. Whereas the Boy Scouts of America, Palatka District, has held an annual Scouting for Food drive with the Salvation Army of Douglas County as a community service to feed those in need in our community for 31 years, and the Salvation Army and Palatka District Boy Scouts will continue to faithfully conduct an annual Scouting for Food drive to benefit those in need in our community. Now, therefore, I, Stuart Boley, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim March 31st to April 7th as the 31st anniversary of Palatka District Boy Scouts Scouting for Food. Why don't you young men come up and we'll get a picture and I'll give you this proclamation. Green, yes. Come on up here. Oliver, you stay here with me. I'm going to hit turn around. Okay.
Spread off across there.
Yeah. Okay.
There we go.
There we go.
There we go.
Everybody say cheese, okay? Cheese. Okay, now Oliver and I are going to step up front, and I'm going to hand you the proclamation. There you go. Thank you for your efforts on behalf of the folks in Lawrence.
You're welcome.
Our next proclamation is Public Health Week. It's a hard act to follow, Dan.
Photo. But like the Scouts, we are always prepared at the Health Department. So thank you for helping us proclaim this week as Public Health Week in recognition of the work of 45 great, wonderful staff that I have the privilege to work with.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Whereas good health and quality of life for everyone in Lawrence is an important goal for our community, and the role of public health is to protect, promote, and restore the public's health. An action by community leaders to implement policy changes that promote the community health plan goals of healthy living, active living, reduced poverty, improved access to health care, and mental health care will make our community a healthier place to live for current and future generations. Now, therefore, I, Stuart Boley, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, do hereby proclaim the week of April 2 to 8, 2018 as Public Health Week. Thank you, Dan. Hello there.
Hello.
We're here for the,
We are here for, thank you for recognizing April as Child Abuse Prevention Month.
That's right.
That's represented by the pinwheel, which each of you will receive, and these will be planted both here at the City Hall and down at the Judicial Center and in front of the Health Department. So this is recognizing April as Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month. And we just want to say thank you for the services that you support for children and families, because every dollar that's spent up front saves $7 down the road. So thank you for supporting children and families.
thank you. So, whereas children are key to the city's future success, prosperity, and quality of life, and while children are our most valuable resource, they are also our most vulnerable. And whereas children have a right to be safe and to be provided an opportunity to thrive, learn, and grow, And whereas child abuse and neglect can be prevented by supporting and strengthening families in Douglas County, Kansas through the 5 protective factors: nurturing and attachment, knowledge of child-youth development, parental resilience, social connections, and concrete supports for parents. Whereas we must come together as partners so that the voices of our children are heard by all, and we are as a community extending a helping hand to children and families in need. And whereas by providing safe, stable, and nurturing relationships for our children, free of violence, bullying, abuse, and neglect, we can ensure that the city's children will grow to their full potential as the next generation of leaders, helping to secure the future of the city, state, and nation. Now, therefore, I, Stuart Boley, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2018 as Child Abuse Prevention Month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Chrissy Heichel. I'm here on behalf of, we have some staff and volunteers and board here on behalf of the Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We are in our 46 years of providing services to this community. We served more people than ever last year, and we're actually starting some really exciting initiatives on prevention and education in our community. So we're excited to offer the month with you and share it.
Congratulations and thank you on your 46 years. Whereas Sexual Assault Awareness Month calls attention to the fact that sexual trauma and abuse is widespread and impacts every person in this community. And whereas rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment harm our community, and statistics show that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men will be raped at some point in their lives, and that 2 out of 3 sexual assaults are never reported to the police. And whereas child sexual abuse prevention must be a priority to confront the reality that 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls will experience a sexual assault before the age of 18. And whereas the theme of Lawrence's Sexual Assault Awareness Month's campaign is "Your Voice Has Power." Our words shape the world around us. Whether you speak out against locker room talk or help someone better understand these issues, your voice is powerful and necessary in this conversation. Whereas we join advocates and communities across the country in taking action to prevent sexual trauma and abuse. Now, therefore, I, Stuart Boley, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2018 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Thank you.
You want a picture?
Thank you.
They would like to have a picture, Mayor.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Hey, how's it going?
Where's they go here? Where do you want to go? Okay, here.
Put all the ladies over here.
Oh, okay. Got it?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Hello, I'm
Hi.
Margaret Bayer, representing the Math Department at the University of Kansas, and with me is Bojana Pasik-Duncan.
Yeah.
Um,
Welcome.
We're here for the proclamation of Math Awareness Month. Math Awareness Month, I'm sorry, and Tyrone Duncan. Math Awareness
Tyrone.
Month has been celebrated nationally since 1986, and at KU since even before that in 1984. And this year we're celebrating both mathematics and statistics. We hope to convey to all, but especially the children, that mathematics is interesting, useful, and fun. And so we have several activities. Besides our own local activities, you can go to mathaware.org and see activities and exhibits on the web throughout the month. But probably the most important activity sure, for young people is that this Saturday, we will be having a math competition, and it's divided into 3 levels, 3rd through 5th grade, middle school, and high school. And we encourage all of you to bring your children and your friends' children to compete in this great competition. Registration is required, but you can register on the day of the event. 2 other activities that we have, well, maybe 3 other activities that we have. The Russell Brott Undergraduate Colloquium will be given by Cleve Moeller, who is the founder of MATLAB. Maybe you hear advertisements for MATLAB on NPR. And that's on April 19th. And we have a distinguished professor lecture on April 12th by Constantine Dafermos on the progress and challenges in the theory of hyperbolic conservation laws. We also will be having workshops for 5th graders during the month to celebrate Math Awareness Month. So,
Great, thank you. So, whereas mathematics is the foundation discipline for science and technology, and mathematical reasoning, analysis, and problem solving are increasingly vital in preparing our youth to lead productive and responsible lives, and whereas mathematics is a living and growing discipline, continually being created and discovered. The power of mathematics is revealed in the richness and beauty of its intellectual structure and the diversity of its application to almost every field of human endeavor, and whereas the Department of Mathematics of the University of Kansas is dedicated to the creation, application, and teaching of mathematics and to serving the mathematical needs of the community. Now, therefore, I, Stuart Boley, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2018 as Mathematics Awareness Month. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck this weekend.
Thank you.
Hi,
Hello.
I'm Katie Barnett. I'm the Vice Chair of the City of Lawrence's Human Relations Commission. The Human Relations Commission endeavors to end discrimination and also assists in enforcing the Chapter 10 of the City Code, which is the city's equivalent to the federal civil rights law. And today I'm here to promote April as Fair Housing Month. It's actually the 50th anniversary of the Federal Fair Housing Act. And before that, this past July was Lawrence's 50th anniversary of enacting our Fair Housing City Code. So I accept the proclamation from the mayor, and also I do want to make sure, if I get this right, for the 4th year in a row, we are still hosting the Fair Housing Act poster contest with the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority, the Housing and Credit Counseling Incorporated, and the School District USD 497. Those entries will be displayed at the Lawrence Public Library throughout the month of April. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Whereas the City of Lawrence supports efforts to eliminate discrimination in housing by working to educate all its residents on fair housing rights and responsibilities, and through enforcement of fair housing laws, including Chapter 10 of the Code of the City of Lawrence, and whereas the month of April is officially set aside as Fair Housing Month throughout this nation, now therefore I, Stuart Boley, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, in conjunction with the annual national commemoration, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2018 to be Fair Housing Month.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so now we have the AmeriCorps folks.
Hello. I'm
Hello.
Linda Brandenberger with the United Way of Douglas County, and I'm the AmeriCorps Program Director. And today is National Service Recognition Day, and we have not only United Way AmeriCorps members standing here, but also Boys and Girls Club of Lawrence AmeriCorps members. And then we have an AmeriCorps Vista with the Lawrence Public Library. And we also have vistas at the Lawrence Community Shelter and with communities and schools. So to date, we have over 1 million members that have served in the last 24 years since AmeriCorps' inception. And we're very happy to report that 2 weeks ago, Congress passed the omnibus bill, which let our funding go through the end of the fiscal year. So we're not worried about that for now. And these AmeriCorps members are our boots on the ground, helping everybody along the lines of education, health, financial stability, and they're pretty amazing, and we're very happy that they're here. And they've each signed up for a year of service, receiving a very small stipend. So they're doing great things in our communities that we couldn't do without them. So thank you for inviting us here for yet another year of
Yeah.
recognition. And
Welcome
you
and
got-
thank you for your service. We appreciate what you're doing for our community. And I'll go ahead with the proclamation.
Okay.
Whereas service to others is a hallmark of the American character and central to how we meet our challenges, AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps Vista participants address the most pressing challenges facing our communities, from educating students for the jobs of the 21st century and supporting veterans and military families, to providing health services and helping communities recover from natural disasters. And whereas AmeriCorps members and Senior Corps volunteers demonstrate commitment, dedication, and patriotism by making an intensive commitment to service, a commitment that remains with them in their future endeavors. And whereas the Corporation for National and Community Service shares a priority with mayors nationwide to engage citizens, improve lives, and strengthen communities, and is joining with mayors across the country for the National Service Recognition Day on April 3rd, 2018. Now, therefore, I, Stuart Boley, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, April 3, 2018, as National Service Recognition Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Might we have a photo up?
Yeah, we're going to do a photo.
Okay.
Here? Okay, I'm going to hand this over to you so you can share. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
She's the master gardener. I'm a master food volunteer. Food volunteer.
There we go, okay. Hello.
Hi.
My name is Luann Wilcox, and these are my friends, and we are here to represent the Lawrence Parkinson's Support Group. We are people who live with Parkinson's, are care partners to people with Parkinson's, or love someone with Parkinson's. Parkinson's is a brain disorder that is chronic and progressive and can seriously alter a person's life and the people that love them. Our organization exists to encourage and inspire and educate those folks who have been there, from us who have been there. Our group has approximately 100 contacts, and our support group has between 40 and 50 attendees every month. But the research shows us that 1% of our population is afflicted with Parkinson's. So in our community, that would be more like 1,000 people. So we were hoping to reach out to you through this proclamation and other things that we're doing this month to ask for your help in getting the word out. We're a fun group. We like to be positive. We like to be inspiring. We like to educate people on new therapies. There's old ways of doing things, and then there's brand new ways of doing things, and we like to let people know about them and have them feel encouraged and inspired. And so we want to thank you for your proclamation today, and we're trying to get the word out, so
Okay, thank you.
thank you very much.
Whereas Parkinson's disease is a degenerative brain disorder that affects 1.5 million adults in the United States, with over 14,000 people diagnosed with Parkinson's in the state of Kansas alone. And whereas more individuals suffer from Parkinson's disease than multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, and Lou Gehrig's disease combined, and whereas April 11th has been proclaimed World Parkinson's Day, a day for all to recognize the need for more research and assistance in dealing with the devastating effects of Parkinson's disease. And now, therefore, I, Stuart Boley, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2018 as Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month. Thank you for your work on behalf of our citizens.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you.
At this point, we'll move on to the consent agenda. All matters listed below on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Members of the public wishing to speak to an item that has been pulled off of the consent agenda will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. And there's a clock right over here that will help you discern when your 3 minutes is up. So, are there any items that a member of the commission would like to pull from the consent agenda?
We had a request to pull 8A.
8A. Yeah. So, any other items that a member of the commission would like to pull? Are there any items that a member of the public would like to pull from the consent agenda? We've got 8A. 8D. 8D. Nine. Okay, so we have 8A, 8D, and 9. In addition to the items on the consent agenda, we also have claims in the total amount of $5,652,435.07 to 350 vendors. I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda, with the exception of items 8A, 8D, and 9.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Vice Mayor Larson, second from Commissioner Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? That's unanimous. Okay. 8A.
My name is Tom Carlson. I live on Branchwood Court on the north side. There are 4 residences along there. They are directly adjacent to this property development which is happening on 6th Street. There are 2 items in the preliminary layout which are of interest to us and may not have been brought to your attention particularly well. All right, this is the south side of the development here, and this building in particular is the one we're concerned about. There's a 10-foot setback for it on their side, and our houses have a 30-foot setback on the back side here, and this line here is not where the house is, it's closer, approximately there. The problem with this is that they are planning to construct one building on that setback line, and this is going to be the elevation, the preliminary version of the elevation for that, and it's 80 feet long, and it is going to be directly outside of at least two of the residences: family room window, dining room window, kitchen window, bedroom window. And frankly, that's just too close. It's detrimental to my lifestyle, and I think it's going to be detrimental to the value of our property. So that's what I wanted to bring to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foster.
Go out. Snap. PC. Oh, I gotta go with PC. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
That'd
Yes.
probably be good, yeah.
This item is a second reading of the rezoning ordinance that has associated with it a PD overlay, plan development overlay, which provides for a site plan essentially to go with the zoning. The first reading of the ordinance and the preliminary development plan was on your March 20th consent agenda as it came to you with recommendation from the planning commission of unanimous approval. This was discussed quite a bit at the planning commission meeting. We can pull up we have 2, 3, 4 slides to show you some context with it. But you actually did approve the preliminary development plan on March 20th. This is the second reading of the ordinance that puts it to the RM zoning district. The applicant, Representative Dean Grobe, is here to kind of speak to any issues. There was some discussion at the planning commission that they would work to get as much setback as possible from that south property line, but there are some constraints with the size of the lot and the parking that is required of the development. So we stand ready to present you some of that information if you'd like to see it, or hear from the applicant's representative as well.
I would have, go ahead. I have one question. Is there going to be a privacy fence in between the properties?
Can't recall, Dean, do you recall what the development plan shows?
We didn't show one. I don't know. There is, some of those properties have fences. We did not propose one. In the final development plan, he's proposing some like wrought iron fencing, but nothing along that south property line.
Okay.
Any landscaping?
Yeah, we have the buffer landscaping in there.
I might ask Catherine to pull up
Yeah, maybe the slides.
the
would help.
plan and the
Yeah.
aerial. There was a couple of elements discussed at the planning commission related to this. One being that it's just the one building and not a whole line of building in back, butting up against the homes. The other element that the planning commission talked about was that there's already an existing structure closer to the property line that I think we can show you on our aerial that already is very close to these properties. And these are residential uses that are adjacent to each other. One's single family and one's apartment or multi-dwelling use. But, so those are some of the elements that we discussed. Go ahead, Catherine, just walk them through.
Good evening, Commissioners. So this is just where we're talking about out on 6th Street, just past Walker Russo's Branchwood Drive. This is a slide showing you the existing conditions of the UR parcel now. There's an existing single-family house, and Scott mentioned there is an existing structure currently to the south property line that will be coming down with the proposal. This is our current surrounding zoning. This is proposed for RM 12 with a PD overlay. As you can see, there's a mix of residential multifamily and residential single-family in the area. This is an image of the preliminary development plan. As you can see, that south building is the one we're talking about. They're proposing 6 two-unit buildings. The south one is the one that's 10 feet there from that south property line. That's an actual interior side yard. Their requirement is 5 feet. They currently are showing it at 10 feet, so they are exceeding the current code requirements for that. Again, this is a concept elevations. Initially, they were proposing all 2-story. I think now they're doing a mix potentially of 2-story and 1-story. They're trying to be cognizant of that south property line. They would be taking access off Branchwood Drive. And I did include landscaping, just because I knew that might be a question. There is some landscape buffering that is between this development and the surrounding properties, existing trees. Do you need one slide up in particular, or how about I leave it there?
Yeah,
if you have
let's just
questions?
leave it there.
Has this application changed over time? It started in,
Yeah, it started out as straight rezoning without the PD overlay, and the planning commission deferred it, giving that applicant an opportunity to add a site plan to the application so that the public could see and that you could see what the actual project was.
any other questions for staff or the applicant? Public comment on this item? Okay, let's bring it back to the commission. So the issue before us is ordinance number 9442, rezoning approximately 2.5 acres from Urban Reserve District to RM12 PD, multi-dwelling residential plan development overlay district.
There you go.
Ultimately, this comes out of Planning Commission with a unanimous recommendation. We have to keep that in mind.
It also sounds like the developer has been willing to work with the neighborhood as much as possible, and the trees or further conversation about what that south side will look like seems reasonable.
If you look at the aerial, there's quite a bit of trees there now. Whether some of those will be removed, I don't know. But the fact that staff is requesting that landscaping go back, and it looks like there's some fencing there. The only thing I would suggest is maybe the homeowners work with the property owner about possibly having a fence there, but I don't think that's something that I want to require. I see no reason to move forward with this because they're following all the rules.
I think as long as the applicant remains open to working with the next door neighbor on landscaping and potential fencing, I think that will be important. It's always important to be a good neighbor.
Okay. Good enough. So I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the rezoning of approximately 2.5 acres from Urban Reserve District to RM12 PD, located at 5275 West 6th Street, ordinance number 9442.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion, Vice Mayor Larson, and second, Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's a 5-0. Okay, thank you. 8D, I believe, was the next one.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ken Easthouse. I come here tonight representing the Prairie Park Neighborhood Association. The neighborhood is adjacent to this property that's on 23rd Street, the back end of the property, which is specifically the portion that is seeking to be rezoned from a residential property, effectively a vacant lot, to commercial purposes. The neighborhood and the direct neighbors of the area, Carmen's here with me tonight, have concerns about increased traffic on 24th Street, that it's not really designed to handle it. 24th Street in and of itself is kind of an interesting street in that it's residential and then partially commercial and then partially residential, and it kind of checkerboards through that area. So we're concerned about the increased traffic. We're not terribly concerned. I mean, we just want to be involved in the site planning process, making sure that we're in the loop with any changes that might occur. Contact is made with us and the neighbors, just because historically neighbors along the 23rd Street area have not been terribly receptive to the neighbors on the south side there on 24th Street. So we just want to make sure we're in the loop with the site plan and consulted on those sorts of things. Not necessarily opposing the rezoning, just want to be in the loop.
Okay, so you're just stating your interest?
I'm sorry?
You're stating your interest in being?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we talked about this one a bit when it was before us before. Okay, yeah, public comment. Thank you.
I'm Carmen Lynn. I am next door to this property at 1052 East 24th Street. I am also concerned about the increase in traffic. I know you have addressed most of my concerns with the site planning. I would like to put it out there that I'd like to see access from 23rd Street only and not 24th Street, because that street has been overpopulated with traffic from the Kia dealership that I don't believe was included in their redevelopment. So I just have concerns with also the accommodations for that.
Okay.
Mayor, I would just reiterate that the process that the neighbors can expect is that when we do get an application for site planning that property, we send notice out to those within 400 feet of the property in any adjacent neighborhood. I'm not sure if our process would pick up Prairie Park, how close the boundaries are without looking at the map, but we will make sure to at least send our code required notice out. They should also expect to see our yellow yard signs, that they're real estate sized signs, and they're bright yellow, and they'll indicate there's a site plan that's been submitted for that for that property. And then we encourage them to come down and get with the planner and talk about the site plan. We'll lay it out for you, walk you through what they're proposing, and take the input on that site plan.
Thanks, Scott. Other public comment? Okay, we'll bring it back. The matter before us is ordinance number 9445, rezoning approximately 1.768 acres from RS10 district to CS district, located at 1105 East 23rd Street.
Mayor, I'd move that we approve on second reading the rezoning and just give direction to staff, sounds like they already have it, to make sure that within the code required 400 feet notification, and also to reach out to the Prairie Park Neighborhood Association.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second Vice Mayor Larson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay. Number 9.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I'm sorry for pulling this. My name is Courtney Shipley. I am on transient guest tax, or I guess depends on how you pass this. I just was concerned that Since they've been making changes to boards, they've been very consistent in warning the members of the boards what changes are coming in advance, so they can come and make comment. In this instance, we weren't notified in advance, and I was just concerned that I don't have an objection to term limits, I think that's great. But in case there's someone else who has an objection to the term limits, I think in the interest of clarity and fairness, that maybe we could be warned a few weeks in advance so that they could make those statements. So I apologize, I didn't get to speak with Porter, I hate to put him on the spot. But if maybe we could just put it off a couple weeks, just to allow for that, and come back to consent, so that I don't feel that, maybe in the interest of transparency, that we just didn't know in advance. Thank you, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mayor, Commissioners, Porter Arnell, Director of Communications and Creative Resources. What I realized is that this was going to happen last meeting, but then was delayed because of an approval that was necessary. And so she's absolutely right, the communication didn't occur, and that is my fault, and I apologize for that. So if a delay is appropriate, that would be one way to go.
Okay. Thank you, Porter. Any public comment on this item? Okay, well, let's bring it back.
You want to delay it? Let folks.
The change effectively removes me from the board. And so, I mean, I think the actual sitting members of the board don't have their positions altered as far as replacing them. We're simply adding additional public in lieu of removing me as the city commissioner from that board. So, as the removed person, I did have adequate notice that I was being removed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would be fine with moving on with it. If we're not seeing an impact to individuals other than Matthew, Commissioner Herbert, I would say move forward with it. I would be okay with that.
Okay.
I also see no reason to not delay if the request has been made.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like,
Are there any meetings of the transient guest tax
Yeah, we have
body in the next
What's it coming up?
month?
So what I'm trying to do is because this body only meets typically 2 or 3 times a year for a very specific purpose. After last year's grants deliberations, we hope to meet again so that this body could inform any changes that might occur this year for the grants program, which will happen in the fall.
Okay.
Technically, the way this is written is that it's not identifying individuals, but because the term limit, 3 of them do expire as of March 31st. So conceivably, those 3 people are no longer on the board. So it does impact beyond Commissioner Herbert. It does have an impact in that sense. So.
Okay. But do you have any meetings scheduled in the next month?
I'm working toward having a meeting scheduled
okay.
at the end of April for that purpose. And so it would be actually good to have the input from these folks at that meeting. So this just got a little convoluted.
Okay.
So there really is a reason to move forward at this time, and if we can.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, okay.
so Porter, your preference would be that we go ahead and move forward tonight so that you can address that, or that we hold off on making a decision?
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah.
I would have to agree that holding off is probably a good idea at this point, just so we can address this appropriately with those board members and make sure that that's clear.
Oh, okay.
Because it is impacting other people besides.
Potentially.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
some of this would depend on the mayor and potential
Right.
reappointments and those things, but again,
Reappointments.
that also required some time.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So what would the first city commission meeting be post the next TGT meeting?
Commissioner, I might suggest that you could just defer it indefinitely this evening, and then that way, once Porter's had a chance to have
Okay.
the meeting, it could be scheduled back on your
Okay.
agenda.
Right.
Thanks.
I would move that we defer indefinitely then.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion for Commissioner Herbert, second for Commissioner Ananda. All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Porter. Appreciate it. Okay. Now we'll go on to public comment. The public is allowed to speak to any items or issues except those scheduled on the consent agenda or regular agenda portions of the agenda, after first being recognized by the mayor. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes for public comment. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up if necessary. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments or questions to the commission. So, general public comment.
Dan's said Dan's.
Good evening. My name is Mike Anderson. Certainly always a pleasure to be able to speak here today. For the past 4 years, I've had the pleasure of being a captain on my kickball team in what's known as the Kaw Valley Kickball League. In the past 4 years, we've been fortunate to finish in the top 5 in the league, but unfortunately in the playoffs, we've experienced nothing but, I guess, what you'd call a Shakespearean heartache. And I come to you tonight because I worry that that heartache is going to continue. I was just informed a couple days ago that one of our players, a Mr. Isaac Combs, notified me that other teams are courting him to be on their team. Now, this is devastating for several reasons, as you can understand. One, because he's a wonderful person. 2, because he's a terrific teammate. And 3, because not only is he one of the better players on our team, but you could argue he's one of the better players in the league. So I come to you today in hope that you would consider making May 20th Isaac Combs Day in Lawrence, Kansas. May 20th is the opening day of the KVKL. My hope is that by coming to you today and asking you to make May 20th a National Isaac Combs Day, that maybe he'd be moved and be interested in staying on our team. Now, I certainly understand that this topic is certainly not paramount to the economy, social cohesion, or sustainability of Lawrence. And you might think it's comical, you might think maybe I'm wasting everyone's time here tonight, but perhaps you can relate to the idea that maybe if you were in my shoes, you might think a little bit outside the box and maybe do whatever you could to make sure perhaps one of your better players stayed on your team. It certainly is an issue important to me and certainly my other teammates as well. And I don't know what it would look like. I considered asking for a key, but I know how that's going to end up. I consider asking for parade. I've done that as well. I know how that's going to end up. But I know that's maybe a pipe dream, but I do think perhaps that maybe on a Tuesday coming up, you would be willing to work with the staff and just make a proclamation that May 20th would be known as, again, National Isaac Combs Day in Lawrence, Kansas. I'll now take questions.
How do you spell Isaac Combs?
I-S-A-A-C. Last name is spelled C-O-M-B-S. Mr. Combs has been a standing resident in Lawrence, Kansas for his entire life. He operates and runs a business here in Lawrence, Kansas along Wakarusa, and I think that he, not only for what he's given to the city, but what he's given to my team and the Kaw Valley Kickball League, he would certainly warrant such a day as May 20th.
Is this your way of buying him off?
I think this is a way of hoping that he'll think, wow, someone enjoys my company and my teamsmanship so much that they'd be willing to make the effort to have a day in their honor here proclamated by the city and the city commission. So I don't know, buying off, unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, the league is, no one pays money to have people stay on their team, and I think that's a good thing. But instead, I think that a national day in his honor might convince him.
We can only do local, not national, sorry.
Well, you know, you gotta start somewhere, so I will take local.
Okay.
National obviously is ideal, but hey, I am willing to budge on this issue.
Okay.
And I would take
you.
certainly local and.
Well, thank you very much, sir. You've had your 3 minutes. You can see why we, instead of commenting on these issues, we actually refer them to staff. They're thorny issues.
Oh, of course.
We'll send them to staff and move on with our meeting.
I think
Thank
that-
you.
That sounds just wonderful, thank you.
Other general
Staff
public
thanks
comment.
you as well.
I got the spelling for you, Tom.
Seems like
Come
a
on.
Brandon McGuire job.
Other general public comment.
Good evening. I'm Vicki Colley Akers, and I live at 5205 Harvard Road. I'm chair of the Tobacco Free Living Work Group of the Live Well Coalition, and also co-chair of the Tobacco 21 Task Force. Our task force consists of many community partners, such as the American Cancer Society, the American Heart Association, the Boys and Girls Club of Lawrence, the Lawrence Public Schools, the Lawrence Douglas County Health Department, and Lawrence Memorial Hospital. We've been working to understand the extent to which a policy like Tobacco 21 that raises the legal sales age of tobacco products from 18 to 21 might have an impact in Lawrence. As you have heard from the amazing youth at the Boys and Girls Club, underage youth have relatively easy access to tobacco products, including e-cigarettes. Research tells us that underage teenage users of tobacco access tobacco through their of-age peers. We also know that if we are able to delay the age of initiation of tobacco use, it makes it more likely that people won't start or become long-term tobacco users. Our task force is eager for Lawrence to join the dozens of communities in Kansas, including Parsons, which passed Tobacco 21 last night, as well as 300 U.S. communities that have passed Tobacco 21. You may have heard that a judge in Topeka decided against the Tobacco 21 policy in Topeka. We appreciate that, as noted in the city manager's report, the city attorney's office will continue to monitor this, but note that in 2017, December of 2017, the state attorney general issued a statement finding that the Tobacco 21 policy is constitutional and that communities continue to adopt Tobacco 21, as I mentioned, Parsons, Kansas. We would welcome the opportunity to meet with you or city staff to identify next steps with exploring a Tobacco 21 policy in Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we can refer that one to staff as well.
No, we have for what it's worth, I know we have an all-staff meeting tomorrow at Lawrence High that's dealing with the Tobacco 21 and also vaping among youth and things of that nature. I think it's led by the Boys and Girls Club, youth, and people like that. So looking forward to that. Thank you.
Other general public comment. Okay, we'll move on to our regular agenda then. The first item is to consider authorizing the city manager to execute the consulting contract with GHD Inc. in the amount of $226,182 for the farmland remediation project.
Mayor and Commissioners, Dave Wagner, Director of Utilities. It was a little bit over a year ago, actually maybe a little under a year ago, Matt Bond came to the Utilities Department and indicated there was at the farmland site, there's just too much water and wondered if we had any idea what to do about it. His one question probably generated at least 10 more on the spot and another 100, and probably, I think Matt would agree, he's probably answered at least 1,000 questions to date, and I bet it feels like he's answered 10,000 questions. So we quickly, as we went through that, started to try to answer some of those questions and Matt's basic questions that what are we going to do with too much water at the farmland site. We quickly formed a really large team, and I think everybody but Isaac Combs was in the room. But anyway, and I'm thinking about maybe if he's not busy, we'll ask him to join our team. So that said, I think we brought in a lot of people, a different background than what Matt has. chemical engineers, PhDs, and a lot of people. And at least I'm happy to say that in the short term, we've come to a solution and implemented it, maybe for a period of time over the next 3 years. But there are still lots and lots of unanswered questions about what to do at farmland. And next step, I think we have on an action item for you tonight to consider. I think Sarah Graves is here. She's current project manager on that, and we've got Matt in the room too, so if you have questions, he's got plenty more answers, I'm sure, too. We also brought the consultant, GHD. Andy Enns is here, our utilities engineer. That's a new position for him, so he's given some guidance, and Sarah in the project management role on this project. So hopefully we can answer some of your questions, and we'll leave a lot of it for that. One thing I like to bring up is the new process that we're using for expert delivery and selection of the process. We engaged Dr. Lyons to help us go through and develop proposals as well as sort through those in a really rigorous process. And I think one of the aspects of that process that I like, that I think it does a good job on, is it looks at risk and unknowns and helps us in development of a scope with a selected consultant try to understand where those risk points are, how to take those on, not only in the selection phases, but in the execution phases. So especially where I think there's a project where there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of things to be addressed, provides us opportunities to negotiate a scope and get an idea as a team early on about what those risks are. So I think that's a really good benefit of that project. Before Sarah goes into a little bit, I also wanted to touch on a topic of some interest that I think we faced as we were going through the interim solutions of discharging some of the nitrogen-laden water that was existing at farmland at the time. And we developed this graph that actually starts from January 2017 to March 30th. And the blue bars represent the amount of nitrate in a mass unit at DeSoto. The orange bars, and yes, there are orange bars there, is the amount of nitrate that our discharge operation at farmland contributed. The large areas that you see in this quadrant were the spring runoffs in 2017. And if I zoom into this thing a little bit down low, you'll start to see some of the farmland contributions relative to what's in the background at the river. So this pretty much spans the period of time when we did that discharge. Again, the orange bars are the nitrate concentrate, or the nitrate mass units that went into the river out of farmland, and the blue bars are what's actually in the river. The interesting thing that came to our attention, as well as was interesting to KDHE, is that over this winter month, this, even though it's small relative to the spring that you saw before, this was influenced by the Tuttle Creek Reservoir. At the time when we talked to KDHE, and my point is that the discharges that we did out of farmland, the impact of those on the river would be a very de minimis amount. That was calculated before we started the operations. That was what we expected. And I think, as you can see, relative to what's coming down the river or what is in the river at those locations, that's holding true to form. So, I think even with KDHE approval, I'm really proud of the utility staff and the city as a whole of living up to our environmental responsibilities. And so I like to assure people before we undertook that and agreed that that would be an interim solution in this case, that we kept that in mind, that we did not want to do harm either environmentally or to the health of the public. So I wanted to share this graph. That graph's available. It's a really nice graph, by the way. I just wanted to address that a little bit. I think with that, I'm going to let Sarah come up and give you a little bit of a brief about where we're at, and then also offer some opportunities to ask for some additional questions. Sarah?
Hey, Dave, you said that graph is available. Where would
Yes.
the public go to find that?
I think, I would assume, is this already posted, Sarah, on the website?
It's an HTML file right now. It's not on the website, but we can easily.
Yeah. I would assume we'll put this presentation up, and we can make sure that link with an HTML file's there. It's very detailed, and it's all interactive, so you can,
Okay.
if you do this interactive graph, it is.
Thanks.
Sure.
Evening.
Like Dave said, I'm Sarah Graves. I'm the new project manager for the project. Ever since kind of it got moved into utilities, I've been slowly taking it over. And I just wanted to give you guys an update. As you guys know, we were approved by KDHE to discharge water into the Kansas River due to the storage problem, and that's been in the news and at commission and in Tom's updates, so people know about it. But I wanted to give, it's over now, so I wanted to give an update and a final report on where that's at and how things are moving along at the site, and then what the commission agenda item is tonight, which is to move forward with the consultant. So the discharge was completed on March 30th per KDHE approval. We ended up discharging 36.4 million gallons to the Kansas River through the already permitted NPDES outfall. And I mentioned the NPDES outfall because that is already, it's permitted by KDHE and it's monitored by us year round, and it's always running. It's all the stormwater that comes onto the site. We just added water to it for the last 5 months to get this extra water out of there. We've restored up to 3 years of storage capacity out there, so we have some time to work with as we move forward in this project. As part of the discharge, there were conditions given to us by KDHE and some that we took on our own as a department to make sure that we were doing, as Dave said, and having as little impact to the river as we could. The main thing we were doing was sampling these 2 points every single day and reporting those results to both Water One, which is a downstream user of this water, and to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And we were also using that USGS DeSoto nitrate gauge that was from the graph to monitor the nitrate downstream of us to make sure that we weren't spiking it in any way. So those were the 2 sample points that we would sample every day and report to KDHE. And then the other part of the conditional discharge from KDHE was that we never discharge more than 500,000 gallons in a day, and we never discharge if the river was running under 1,000 CFS. And luckily, the river was running well all winter, and it never dropped below that 1,000 CFS. And we also got all the way up to 500,000 a couple of days, but we stayed consistently underneath it, and we never broke any of those conditions from them. So overall, it was a successful operation that got the water out of the site. So. We also utilize some of the water in land application, which is what is traditionally done at the site. We applied 5.2 million gallons of water as fertilizer water north of the river, north of the site. And we use the highest concentrations of water for that application because it's the most beneficial to the farmers as fertilizer, and it would have had the least impact on the river. 7 fields received that water, and this is just part of the normal. This is the plan that was given for the site when the city took it over in 2010, was to land apply that water. And over the course of the questions that we've asked Matt and the things that we've gone through taking over this project, it's kind of come to light that this land application works well, and we have a really good relationship with the farmers, but it's because of the variability in weather and things like that, we can't depend on it as the only solution, which is why this item's on the agenda and why we're seeking a consultant and moving forward in that way. Additional to getting rid of the water, since the utility department took over, we've been working really hard to improve the site operations and the site infrastructure. We're working ongoing right now to automate all the wellheads that pump water, because right now all the groundwater that's collected on site is just pumped and collected just all the time. And so we're automating it to make sure we have really, really accurate control and knowledge about what the concentrations are coming out of the ground at different times, and have control over where we pump and how we do it and things like that. We also are in the process, actually today, they got there to inspect the tanks on site and make sure that those are structurally sound and that they're still holding the water and doing, some of that stuff is really old infrastructure. So we're starting from ground zero on a lot of the stuff and getting stuff checked out and made sure that it's all functioning well still. Along with that, we've utilized the utilities crews to replace a bunch of pipe that was starting to have failures and make sure that we have at least, and as we're going through this project, and figuring out what the other things we can do with the water, we at least for sure have reliable infrastructure to still land apply in the next few years and not have to build up on that storage and still maintain the relationship with the farmers. And we're also working for asset management and best management practices for maintenance out there and making sure we track what's done and who does it and why it needs it and all of that. We're cross-training between the departments, not the apartments. We've had a lot of public works field crews and a lot of public works staff and a lot of utilities field crews and a lot of field utilities staff working together and learning about what it is, just to make sure that we have a bunch of people available that can do the work and do it successfully. We've also increased, with that, we've increased a lot of the staff commitment and availability to the site so that it's not just a few people doing all the work, because it's a lot of work. It's more work than we thought it would be. So we're updating the operations and procedures as well, making sure that everything's up to date. And we've also developed a gatekeeper stakeholder group of people that could be influenced by this. We've met about the river discharge, and that's anyone from Sierra Club to KDHE to farmers, to make sure that everyone's up to date on what the operations are that are going on. And then we also used, as Dave was talking about, that alternative delivery methods that you guys have heard about with Dr. Brian Lines for the consultant selection for this process. So it was a written proposal and an interview stage. Half of it, the written part, was blind, and as Dave was saying, it's based on risk assessment, so identifying what could go wrong that's controllable, what could go wrong that's not, like if we get a really wet year and we can't land apply any water or something like that, and how we address those risks and track that through the project to make sure that we scoped out everything that we could think of that might affect this project in the long term. The RFP for that was posted in November of 2017. We received 7 written proposals, and we went through 4 rounds of interviews. And that led us to selecting GHD as the consultant through the proposal and interview process. And they're here, as Dave mentioned, for any questions that anybody might have. Their scope that we've been going through negotiations with over the last 3 weeks is basically in these bullet points. The main thing that we want to make sure that we complete with GHD is site assessment and make sure that all of the problems are well defined, because we just want to make sure before we kind of start over. This plan was handed to us, and there's improvements in technologies and improvements in a lot of things that make it so that we can look at this site with new eyes and make sure that we have all the problems defined out there before we start to try to tackle them. And then along with that, GHD will present us an alternative analysis to say all the possible things we could do with the affected groundwater out there. And then throughout this process, obviously, there will be stakeholder engagement, as with that group, with this group, with the city employees, with everyone, to make sure that everyone's needs are being met throughout the project. And then at the end of it, GHD will recommend an alternative or a list of alternatives to us for what should be done with the water after all the studies are done and all of that. So this phase of this project, this scope that we have right now on the contract for tonight, should be complete by the end of this year. And then we'll have a good idea and a good schedule of where to go from there and how to implement the alternatives that are recommended to us. And again, to ensure that everybody's up to date, when the discharge first started, we had that FAQ page on the city website, and we'll continue to update that and provide updates to you all, to KDHE, to the stakeholder group, and to the community as a whole through different facets. And I think this is a good website for the city to access if they have questions about what's going on. So that's all I have. If you have any questions for me or Dave or the consultants, let me know.
I do. Yeah, I don't know if this question is for Dave, but when Dave was up here, he talked about when we first came up with our preliminary solution, which was the dumping of water, that we had KDHE authority to do that, and you had said we essentially had everybody we could think of in the room. We had scientists, we had your crew, everybody else. I guess my question would be, we're spending $250,000 here. Who wasn't in the room initially that now is in the room? How does what we're doing now going to give us more expert knowledge than when we had a room full of scientists and KDHE and everybody else?
You know, I think that our expertise is obviously in water and wastewater, and we know chemistry pretty well. We really don't have an environmental hydrologist. The other thing is and I might let GHD talk about what their scope on the assessment side is. When we look back at the documents, trying to get a picture of what's really going on there relative to what has changed, and now what's available to you to understand those problems, I think has significantly changed over the long haul. A lot of that work that the corrective action decisions and remediation plans are based on is just old. And it's not the same site as it was 20 years ago or when farmland was there. So a lot of things has changed. And I don't know if Dave or...
But wasn't the Kansas Department of Health and Environment involved in that decision-making process? And presumably KDHE would have, maybe I'm making a huge assumption there, but I would assume KDHE would be relatively up to date on environmental issues.
I think they're, you used to work there, didn't you?
Travis did. I'm Dave Hempel,
Okay,
and I work
sorry.
for GHD. This is my colleague, Travis Koval. I think, to your point, is that at the time, there was a limitation on storage, and it was fast exceeding, and more water was being added to it than could be discharged across the river. And so there was kind of an urgent choice between should we truck it away or should we put it in the river. It wasn't let's get somebody on board and let's evaluate some more alternatives. And that's, I think, where we're at now, is stepping back and saying, okay, let's not choose between trucking and discharging it to the river. Let's get a whole bunch of options, and let's go through a very thorough engineering evaluation of your site, make sure that you have all of your source areas assessed, and make sure all of the assessment information is accurate. One of the first things that we want to do is make sure that we have a clear picture of the contamination and the source areas, the ponds, the tanks, and that sort of thing, and put together a picture that we can all look at and understand what's being added to it and where's everything migrating. We're worried that too much water might be being recovered than is necessary in order to control the contamination, and that may be adding to your problem, your storage problem, unnecessarily.
Okay.
Does that respond to your inquiry? Okay.
I have several questions. So you're going to, your evaluation that you're going to do, let's see, where should I start here? You're going to be looking at using the modeling software in order to assess all the data, that's right?
Yeah, modeling is kind of a general term that we use when we have computers put data together so that we can make pictures out of it.
Right.
The first stage is to put together a 3D visualization. We call it a conceptual site model, but it's not going to actually show us fate and transport and those kinds of mechanisms. So we won't have actually a calibration, a migration of where things are going in real time. We'll know where they are today.
Okay.
It's going to give us a snapshot.
So when you look at the project as a whole, you're going to be looking at the consent order that we apparently signed numerous years ago. Are you going to, because there's more aspects to that than just the nitrate issue, are you going to be looking to try to get closure on some of these other items that really, we haven't had any contaminant hits on them, such as the chrome's issue? Are you going to be looking at trying to get that closed out for us?
I think you're already there.
Yeah.
We've discussed it with staff.
But we're not closed out, so we're still having to provide
Right, I think
monetary
there's
funding for it.
a couple of hurdles to get through there is all.
Okay.
Lisa, on the Rickworth site specifically, we've been in discussions with KDHE and Aurora has this week, and we're pursuing the closure process right now. We anticipate that'll happen over the course of the next few months where they have to do a final inspection.
Okay.
The data looks good.
Okay.
So we still have probably, with them monitoring, another round to do on the Rickworth site to make sure those pHs are stable, but we anticipate, we don't see any obstacle to that other than going through what you need to do that. It's not an easy process. We have not engaged GHD specifically to help us with that in this
Okay.
scope. It is not
Okay.
in there. We think we can do
So you
that.
think we can get that closed out? Because it is costing us money every year to continue to
Yes.
have that as part of the, it should have, should have been done years ago. but-
Yes, we anticipate that we're there.
Okay.
And I would hope that we'll have a favorable report to you in third quarter.
Okay, all right. So can you give me an idea, the report that you're going to come up with is going to be a cost-benefit analysis report. Can you give me an idea of what that's going to entail?
Are you familiar with the corrective action planning and studies that KDHE requires?
Yes.
This will be kind of a scaled-back version of that. A cost-benefit analysis will take into account the implementability, the feasibility, the technical impracticability, and that sort of thing, cost. Once we identify the technologies that we think are most appropriate and assemble certain alternative combinations of those technologies, we're going to get with the KDHE and make sure that we refine that list, and then from that list prepare detailed cost-benefit analysis of an engineering design, preliminary engineering design, enough so that we can get comparative costs between the various alternatives.
So, but you will provide that cost-benefit analysis on each one of the proposed methods that you are going to suggest? Is that
That's
correct? Okay. On your technologies, what I read here is you're going to come up with 5 technologies, proposed technologies for doing the remediation.
That's our goal. We think that we can do that.
We can do that. And so when you provide those, how detailed are you going to get into as to how that remediation, the pros and cons, limitations, methodologies, is that going to all be part of the report?
Yes.
Okay, so you'll go into some detail.
Yes. We have to in order to come up with an approximate
Right.
cost, excuse me, that we can compare cost between the two, between them. And the whole purpose, I think, of us being involved is to the point that the other commissioner had asked was, last fall you had 2 alternatives. Neither were good. What we're trying to do for you is come up with 5 alternatives, each of which on any given day will work.
Right, okay. So you've listed some potential technologies here. Can you go into a little bit further about in situ versus ex situ denitrification and what you would see on that type of remedial process? Because there's different ways to do that.
Sure. The in situ would be identifying areas where we might be able to inject a carbon substrate for electron acceptors so that we can go ahead and drive an anaerobic reducing condition that may or may not be already present, enhance one that is, drive it if it isn't, and then that will help reduce the nitrate to nitric gas. If there's too much ammonia present, that could complicate the anaerobic degradation of the nitrate. We'll have to drive the ammonia to the nitrate first, and then try and get the nitrate to denitrify.
So would you look at any reverse osmosis?
We had considered that for groundwater in place. When we pull it out of the ground, pump and treat technologies, we could put that on the list.
You just curious?
Excuse me, can I get you to move closer to the microphone,
sure.
please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
You bet.
Sorry about that. Okay. The software that you guys are proposing to use, the Equus, do you guys have training in that? Because it's a really extensive software program, and it's a great program. But I was wondering what kind of experience you have in actually
We have a
using it.
database group that houses our Equus database in Waterloo, Ontario, and in Detroit, Michigan. We currently house and maintain data for a lot of Fortune 500 companies. Other consultants send their data to us for those Fortune 500 companies, and we house that data in that Equus database.
That's good to hear. I really appreciate that. So the data, once that is put into the software, who owns that?
You own that data.
So would
we
we-
have the license to operate the Equus software,
Right.
and we can provide that to you as we're going through the data as a database platform. Where you don't have the licensing, we can put it into a database and then provide you with a browser tool to look at the data and manipulate the data and do some basic queries in that data. And then at the end of the project, when we're done, we provide that data back to you in a non-Equus format, such as an Access database or CVS files or whatever.
So would it be in a form that if for some reason we looked down the road and said, you know, this is really a decent software to have to monitor us as we go forward, would it be in a format that we could actually download it to that software?
If
With-
you mean if you had a
Yeah, if we-
license for Equus?
yeah.
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
Equus owns the database and
Right.
the way that it's in the database. So if you got a file like a license to operate on a personal basis, the professional level, then yes, you could maintain that data in your own database.
Okay. And there's no charge for that, I mean, not for I'm not talking software, but just for you guys to have that data to give to us, give back to us in that format?
That's just an hourly rate to upload or download that data to you to a platform where you can get it into your own database.
Okay, all right, thank you. One of the optional contingency that you had talked about in 3.6, could you give me, it regards out-of-scope issues that may arise. Could you give me some ideas of what potentially would you foresee happening that would cause you to want to charge extra?
Well, it wouldn't be charging extra, it would be an out-of-scope issue, like if we are looking at the data and we see a data gap, you'll see where there's a data gap analysis in there. And if we see a small amount of data that needs to be collected, rather than go back in for a large amount of extra money, we might be able to cover it with what's available in that contingency. So the contingency is purely optional and set aside and would require separate written authorization to engage.
Okay. So it's for data gaps is what I'm
Right.
hearing, is that correct?
Ideally, that's what we identified it for.
But aren't we the ones who've collected all the data and we're going to continue to collect that data? You're not collecting any field data at all, is that correct?
That's a correct statement, unless the data gap analysis reveals that more data needs to be collected to refine some source areas that may need more information.
So then you would be collecting that data, or would staff go out and collect that?
We're not sure exactly how that would apportion out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lisa, I think at that point in time, it would depend on what it is.
Mhm.
Obviously, I think if they identify a gap, you know, we've got some good data skill sets and the ability to do wet chemistry analysis and
Mhm.
collect that. Well, obviously, I think if we have the resources and capabilities, we'll do it.
Okay.
But if not, and it'd be kind of a game time decision depending on what the identification is and what the skill sets is. But that would be part of, I think, the teamwork with the consultant on that to say, more than likely we'll default to city staff, especially if we have the capability, working with them, helping identify, and are we getting them what they need to make those decisions and modify a little experiment in the field. You know, we're actually doing some of that now, because you mentioned pump and treat.
Mhm.
We are doing a treatability analysis with Dr. Sturm up at KU with some pilot reactors
Yeah.
in our lab, working with us on doing some of the different process units that might be used in the future to treat that waste as well. So it's not just GHD working on things. We're trying to take stuff that's in our wheelhouse and own that.
Okay, that sounds really good. One more thing, when I was looking at the item number 4, assumptions and limitations, something that kind of stuck out here that I guess I don't recall hearing about this before, is that there is a new rural water supply immediately down gradient from the site. Is that, do you know what that is?
That's correct, Lisa. Public Wholesale District number 25 is
Okay.
constructing a new plant there, and it is going to use wells on the alluvium. So
Mhm.
that's one of the new change conditions that, you know, we want to make sure we cover the basis on those things. We know their engineering reports indicates that they don't believe there's a concern with that, but I think we want to take a look at that
Okay.
and make sure on our own.
It says that it's immediately down gradient. How far down gradient is it?
It's said to be a quarter mile or less.
Really?
Yeah.
And they're moving forward with a water supply there. Huh, okay. It does seem a little close. Okay, I think that's all on the technical stuff.
Got a quick question, if you don't mind, if I
Yeah,
interject.
sorry.
On the line-by-line itemized bid that you provided, where you break things down hourly, under Section 2, you've got a category labeled stakeholder engagement, and its sum total represents about 160 hours of labor and about 12% of the entire budget. What do you anticipate stakeholder engagement actually looking like for $27,000?
Well, in this particular case, we have 4 meetings, I think, planned. We don't have any idea what the gateholder process will take. We're expecting 4 meetings. Myself and Travis will join those meetings. We'll prepare for them. We'll attend them and answer questions. So it's more of an estimate. We don't really know how many meetings we'll end up having or
Yeah,
or how involved
I understand, you know, in Lawrence, we like engagement, but, I mean, you guys have 160 hours budgeted for that. That's
I think Commissioner Herbert, in that area, I think you would agree that that's somewhat unpredictable. And it's kind of one of those things we identified that could be a variable that we might need to have more of or less of. I think the way that the contract's implemented, if we use it, we pay for it. If we don't, we don't. And I think it's another thing that we'll continue to do, as we've already set up that work group, is where we can, I think we'll engage those stakeholders as the city staff. Try to minimize the cost with the consultant, but we may need them just from a, you know, I think at least get them in front of the stakeholders to get some confidence in the community that this group really knows what they're doing on a technical basis. And help us message some of the technical things we may not know as well, if there's questions about those, to get accurate answers. But I don't think there's a given that it's going to be that amount of money. It'll be, you know, I think Sarah and Andy and the rest of us will have to monitor that and make sure that the scope that we actually execute with them is appropriate to what we can do. If we manage it well, I think the public engagement will pay for itself in a lot of ways. I think it takes time. I think staff can do a lot of that.
That's kind of where I'm going with
Yeah.
this. Is I mean, that represents 12% of the entire budget, and it would seem to me that a lot of this stakeholder engagement, oftentimes, in the past with what we've done with KDHE, has played out in the forms of, you know, city manager report and things of that nature, where we can give regular updates to the community. And I understand that there's a real need to resolve this. I just, you know, when I see 160 hours of stakeholder engagement budgeted, and then the first response is, what does that look like? We have no idea. That concerns me.
Right.
That 12% of your budget, the response is, we have no idea what that is.
Yeah, man, I found it to be extremely high myself, and because that amounts to 40 hours per event. They're going to have 4 events. And I agree, it just does seem to me the city is the one who winds up addressing a lot of the questions from the public. I can't fathom us referring the public to the consultant without it going through the city first, so we're going to be spending the time on it. And those meetings, the 4 stakeholder meetings are going to be pretty doggone similar, I imagine. So I don't know why you'd have to recreate it each time. That's 40 hours each. It seems very, very high to me.
Certainly. Now, some of that stakeholder engagement, that stakeholders can often, they also mean KDHE. So some of that time could be used in negotiating with the KDHE as far as the consent order goes, or as far as looking at the risks that had previously been at the site compared to that are at the site now based upon the current site conditions.
But your proposal does not say that,
No,
Travis.
not
Your
at all.
proposal says that your stakeholder engagement is identified community stakeholders. You've discussed the fact that you're going to meet with KDHE as part of your project management, which would be task number 1. You talk about there will be about 12 meetings with the city and KDHE on that. So stakeholder engagement does not include, what I read, anything to do with KDHE contact.
Yeah. It is based upon the assumptions that are in the previous section, the 8 hours. But the bottom line is, if we don't use that time, if Dave doesn't ask us to come to the meetings, or if we only need to provide a little bit of information for them, then you won't be billed for that time.
I also had a question. You done with that, Matt? I'm sorry. I had a question about your travel expense allowances. It says cost plus 10%, but then you have it as a line item as lump sum. So is it going to be billed as a lump sum at $5,000, or is it going to be billed at cost plus?
No, you're right. It's cost plus for expenses, for travel expenses, for airfare, cars, lodging, meals for folks that we use from out-of-town offices that would come in, and for our mileage to and from meetings and whatnot
So
for
you
the
don't,
course of the 8
you don't
months.
have enough local expertise to actually do this without flying people in?
Well, there are regional and national experts that would be brought in as well.
So
No,
how many
we-
people do you have in your offices here in Topeka and Kansas City?
7.
7? Oh, that's it, okay. So does that, as far as for the travel expenses, is it going to be where you're submitting invoices for your receipts and so forth, or how does that work for you?
We normally put them on our invoices to you, and you can see the receipts for each of the expenses.
Okay. Okay.
And again, that 5,000 is an estimate, and we'll only bill you for the expenses that we need.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have this right now.
I appreciate your expertise, Lisa, and the questions that you asked, because I think that any that I had, you went into a lot further detail and broader understanding of the implications of those. So thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Dave, you had mentioned that we've worked with KU and professors up there. Have we been billed by the university at all for the work that they've done with us?
With Dr. Sturm, we have an agreement with KU, and I can't remember how much that is over a year-long study where we are supporting an intern in her efforts, specifically to do that study on the treatability of the farmland waste. So that's a separate contract of this.
Okay.
We also have Dr. Sturm for various things. We use her on a contract basis for expert consulting. We used her on the Wakarusa facility. We use her on process analysis, both on water and wastewater on a recurring basis. So she's somewhat part of our group, and on an ad hoc basis that we will consult with her as well on occasion. So we use her expertise, as well as Dr. Lyons on the delivery side of that.
So as part of the reason we're bringing in a group here that we feel that we do not have adequate knowledge among the group we're working with now? I mean,
That's
are we
correct.
saying that we lack the scientific background at the University of Kansas?
I think we lack the scientific background that GHD provides, and I'm not sure KU would do a consulting service like that, honestly, Commissioner Herbert. That's what these people do. We certainly don't have that expertise on a remediation project in groundwater and hydrology within the existing staff. We just don't have it. If you start pumping it out of the ground and want to talk about treatment, we can start having a dialogue about that. That's an area that's in our wheelhouse. But groundwater remediation and hydrological movement underneath, that's not something that we have had staff capable of doing, or really any experience in.
Mayor, if I may, Commissioner Herbert, I just want to make sure it's clear what we're working towards here. This study and this consultant agreement, we are working towards significant regulatory changes. So a change in the consent order, ultimately, I think is probably what will come out of this. And the city staff internally did not negotiate the original consent order alone without the help of expert technical consultants and environmental attorneys. So it's more than just developing operational changes or process changes. It's really developing the data model that we need to support that regulatory change with KDHE and I think ultimately EPA. So that's a very complex and burdensome task. So bringing in the outside consultants will augment our skill sets and our knowledge and help us prepare for that that next phase, which will happen after this study is complete, probably beginning of 2019.
Could I add something? I just want to add something to that. A study like this is extremely typical in the environmental field to conduct this type of a study. In fact, it's very much needed, I think, on this project. Now, the extent of how it's going to be conducted, that can always be debated. But I think going forward, this is extremely important for how we're going to find ways to spend that money the best, using the best technologies available today, because it changes so quickly, technologies do. So yes, we do need to do this. And yes, we need a consulting firm that can be the liaison between us and KDHE. It's great that we've got staff so knowledgeable that they can work with KDHE, but to have a consultant in there who's versed in the regulatory world, who is versed in the chemical as well as the engineering world, for this type of study is extremely important if we're going to be able to find better ways to spend our money and do it in more quick fashion. So I'm a strong supporter of doing this. The costing of some of this stuff I find to be I'm not happy with it, because I do think that they've provided some costs in here that are just overboard. I do think that, and whether or not they can modify that, I don't know, or whether it'd be worth it. The idea of 10% contingency on the end, I question that too, because we're not asking them to go out there and do any field work. They're just analyzing data that we've been collecting for 10 years or more. So why you would need a 10% contingency on the end there, I don't think I would agree with that at all. But otherwise, the report that they give, or the project summary they gave, I thought it was very reasonable to move forward with this, and I would support it because of that.
Well, we need to have some public comment
Yeah,
before
sorry
we get to
about
that
that.
point.
Yeah.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, thank you. Public comment on this issue. Okay, I guess we'll bring it back to the commission to discuss considering authorizing the city manager to execute the consulting contract with GHD Incorporated and the amount of $226,182 for the farmland remediation project. So you can pick up where you left off.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I jumped the gun on that.
I guess I'll follow up with what
Yeah.
you said. Certainly this is an issue that has incredible importance to not only our community, but surrounding communities. I mean, when we recognized that when we began the nitrate dump in the river, that there was a response that came from Johnson County as well as others. This is an issue that we need to deal with, not only for ourselves, but for those around us. My concern is always that any time you approve something that has a set budget, it's always hard for that budget to ever get smaller. I mean, sure, you can say that, yeah, if we don't spend the money, we won't bill you for it. But things have a way of costing what people say they'll cost, and there are some things within the cost estimate here that I find very odd, to put it lightly. The 160 hours cumulative of stakeholder engagement, I think is flatly ridiculous. That the stakeholder engagement ought to be happening by way of the city, and ought to be happening at this level, and that ought to be the responsibility of city and city staff. I don't know that we need to be spending 12% of our entire budget having 4 community meetings. I don't see that as a good use of our resources. I think the money ought to be devoted where the expertise lies, which, when you have things budgeted for professional geologists, when you're flying in chemical engineers, I totally understand that, and that's something we need to do, but there's a lot of stuff built into this cost estimate that I truly believe we can handle at the city level, that it's not going to require a consulting firm, billing at $195 an hour for public engagement. And so I have some real concerns with the cost associated with this.
Just on item 2, is that where you're?
The stakeholder engagement, I had a lot of the same questions you did regarding the travel expenses, how it's listed as a lump sum, but then we're told that it's actually going to be cost plus 10%, but that's not how it's written in the contract at all. So in terms of the operational portion of this, I agree with you. This needs to happen, and I support it. But I think the way that the line item budget is drawn up is poor.
Well, in the stakeholder engagement, I think the consultant does need to be involved in that. They need to be there to answer the technical questions about what they're proposing and what they're looking at. So there does need to be some level of stakeholder engagement by the consultant. So, but I agree with you that I find it to be quite excessive. So, and then I also agree with you that if you provide the authorization for the money, that somebody finds a way to spend it.
It's going to get spent.
Yeah. I mean, that, as far as the costs go, those were the stakeholders engagement as well as the optional contingency were the two things that I saw that were way out of line. I felt were way out of line anyway.
So do you have a suggestion?
I mean, I would ask them to go back and look at that stakeholder engagement, the costs on that, and to make a more, what would be a more realistic look at it, because, you know, it's going to be a 3-hour public meeting 4 times probably, 2 or 3 hour public meeting. Whether or not you need to invest 40 hours into each one of them, staff time, that just seems out of whack. So I'd ask you to look at that and to, the contingency, I just don't see the need for it, but I know.
Do you want to delay approval of this until those things are ironed out, or do you want to approve this with staff direction?
I would just approve with, I would vote on it with staff direction. Yeah. If
So
we
the
can,
direction
can
to
we?
staff would be to what, though?
I
To
would,
manage the contract or change the contract?
is to take a look at that, or have them take a look at the stakeholder engagement part, especially that part, I think. Can we do that?
Well, I'll opine publicly. I think I would remove the stakeholder engagement section from the contract as it's currently worded and just modify the contract with the understanding that we would sit down with the contractor and come up with modified language that tends to address the issues that you have spoken of.
Yeah.
With the consultant's agreement that that approach is acceptable to them.
Yes.
Secondly, the contingency, I would say to you that the one thing I would say, and I don't recall that specific language, but the contingency should be subject to our authorization before it proceeds. That's built in already? I think you have that protection. The thing that, there's been a lot of discussion at the commission table, and the thing I would say to you is that you have to remember that KDHE is the regulatory agency in this regard. They're not going to be necessarily proffering a lot of research or suggestions on how to resolve this problem. So I agree with your comment that using a consultant is most appropriate for this kind of a process to get this issue resolved. Somebody else at the commission table said earlier, this should have been done a long time ago. Yes, it should have been done a long time ago, but we tend to run into these things and we have to deal with them as they present themselves. So I really think that this is the right approach. With the cautions that you have indicated in the presence of the consultant and the staff, I'm confident that we can, continue to monitor this and they will understand where the pressure points are coming from in terms of your concern about making sure that the costs are monitored. But I would modify that one section, and the other section on the contingency, I'd pretty much leave as is. It requires authority before we progress to that. As KDHE is the regulatory agency, they're subject to pressures from agencies other than us, which we saw when the idea was suggested, and I think it was KDHE's idea, to allow us to pump to the river. And they got a lot of pushback on that. And quite frankly, this staff addressed a lot of those issues. At times, I wish that we could have had some additional help, but we did tend to address those issues. And Commissioner, you were a big help in kind of meeting those concerns and explaining this, quite frankly, in a layman's language that needs to be done in our community, because there's a lot of science involved in this, and there's a lot of alternatives that we need to address going forward. But one of the the things that was required is for us to come up with a study, what we were going to do, going forward with this property. So I think we're on the right track. I have a lot of confidence in this department to handle these issues, and we will address public issues as best we can. But you know that there are a lot of very bright, talented, very subject-specific people in this community that can pose some very tough questions, and we need to have the consultants that can back the data up and present these things as they can, that we probably can't, and that independent view of these things going forward. So I have no issue with the use of the consultant. I understand your concern about the public part of that, and I think with that language change, that would satisfy that concern.
Well, I don't have any, I said that I think the consultant does need to be at the stakeholder meetings.
I understand that,
Okay.
but what my point is that you could direct that we strike that language as it currently is, with the understanding that we'll come back with an amendment to the agreement that calls out specifically how that would work, understanding the comments you made, that we heard, and the consultant heard. And you heard my question to the consultant, and the consultant said that they were able to do that and willing to do that.
Okay.
That's how I would recommend you approve it.
Okay. What do you think of that?
Want to make the motion?
Go ahead.
How would we word that motion? That we,
I would recommend that you approve the agreement minus the stakeholder
Okay, so-
engagement provisions in the agreement, and those provisions would be struck with the expectation that the city staff and the consultant would come back with revised language for review and approval by the city commission.
Can we
Okay,
just say
so-
so moved?
okay, so
That's
we're,
what I'd
we're
say.
we're authorizing the city manager to execute the consulting contract with GHD Inc. in the amount of $226,182 for the farmland remediation project, minus the stakeholder provisions, with the provision that you'll come back to us with an amended agreement on that topic. I think that's your motion?
Correct.
Okay. Sherry, we good? Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Commissioner Ananda, second from Vice Mayor Larson. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, folks. Thanks, Dave. Okay. Well, actually, we did public comment,
Yeah, we
didn't we?
did.
Yeah, we did.
Okay,
Yeah, we
okay.
did.
And people left during public comment, that's what I noticed.
So I move
Okay.
We can
So at this point, I would consider a motion to recess into executive session for approximately 20 minutes to discuss upcoming employer-employee negotiations pursuant to the employer negotiations exception set forth in KSA 75-4319B3. The justification for the executive session is to keep employer-employee negotiation matters confidential at this time. At the end of the executive session, the commission will resume its regular meeting in the city commission room. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Soden. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we will recess into executive session until 7:53. Thank you, Casey. I would accept a motion to recess into executive session for approximately 15 minutes to discuss upcoming employer-employee negotiations pursuant to the employer-employee negotiations exception set forth in KSA 75-413, 4319B3. That would put us at, 15 minutes would be what? What is it, 5 till 10 after? 8:10. 8:10.
Second.
Public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
We have nothing to report. Commission items.
I've got one. Forgot to say it last time. I would like to have us consider doing a work session on that T21 proposal that was brought for us by the students during the last city commission meeting. To have a better discussion of the aspects. I know you've got
Tobacco 21?
something. Yeah, Tobacco 21. I know you've got something in your manager's report on it from the legal, but I'd still like to see us do a work session.
Are you making that a motion?
Yeah, I'm making that a motion, I guess.
It'll have to get in the queue.
Oh, okay, sure. So I make a motion.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Can you talk a little more about what you would want the
I would like
work
to.
session to actually
I would
lead
like to
towards?
see, have a discussion as to the pros, obviously the pros and cons of it, as well as how other cities are dealing with it right now. There seems to be a big push. I think that there's some merit to get just more details about what would be expected from that type of a program, an ordinance or whatever.
We could do some research and provide a memorandum to you, and after reviewing that, if you wanted to evaluate whether it is worthy of a work session, or we could collect the information if you give us some specific direction on what you'd like to see in that work session. I'm sorry, I was in the room, I didn't hear the entire conversation.
You know, I think the question really is, do you want to take the risk of moving ahead and standing a challenge from somebody in the community based on what happened in Topeka? Or do you want to, you know, take the risk and move forward with something, hoping that, I think it was the Attorney General and indicated that it was constitutional for communities at a home rule level to pass their own provisions. You know, that's what this is really coming down to, is do we let let others play out the court cases and see how it ends up? You know, so much of the decision-making that we take on nowadays, you know, can go this direction, which has led me to be, I don't always need to be number one, passing a new ordinance. Let somebody else fight that challenge. And
I don't think we'd be, there's several communities that have passed it.
So there'd probably be some class action or something on it at some point.
I guess that's what my gut is feeling, is that we don't have to be first in everything. And my preference is to let someone else pay to fight it through the courts, and then we can deal with it after that has been nailed down a little better.
I'm not asking for an ordinance, I'm just asking for a discussion on what's the merit, what would be the merits of a program if we would decide to move forward with it. And if that means running it through legal first and getting a memo regarding how they view it, or not.
Yeah, see, that's why I asked her what your purpose of it was, because my interest in it at this point, to be honest with you, is most highly revolving around the recent judicial finding. What was it, March 22nd? I mean, it's very, like, a week ago. My idea of the work session would be more the legality base of it, less the, you know, what's the pros or what's the economic con of local businesses. I think I need a better understanding of where we stand from a judicial standpoint, if this is a fight we're going to lose.
The opportunity for either parties to appeal the order has not expired yet. They will have, I believe, 30 days from the date that order was entered in order to file an appeal. It would go to the Court of Appeals unless the Supreme Court found it of interest and wanted it to go straight to the Supreme Court. So that we should know, you know, within the next 3 weeks or so, whether the city of Topeka is going to take, try to appeal the court's decision. So we'll have some more information on the legality here soon, and it's just not a closed question yet.
Which is the way she kind of left, Tony left the comment in the report that she'll continue to review the case pending whether there's an appeal, and then if there is an appeal, probably want to watch how that plays itself out.
So the idea then would be to just wait till the whole legal battle ends before we weigh in on it?
Tony?
Well, again, that's, as Mr. Marcus said, we could, if you want to initiate an ordinance, we could initiate an ordinance. We may be subject to the same sort of appeal, we may not. There are several cities that have passed the ordinance and haven't had the legal challenges, apparently. So, it could go either way. It's just, with this decision so recent, it is something that I want to watch.
Okay. I'm not saying we should pass an ordinance. I'm just saying we need to have further discussion about it. That's what I want to have. To get.
Well, we could put it on pending work sessions and
That's fine.
kind of
Just see
keep
how
eye
it-
on it. And
see how it plays
So it's
out.
there,
Yeah.
and then,
That's fine.
put it on when we have better information from legal.
Yeah.
I think we will continue to hear from the public on this topic, so
Yeah.
I don't think it's going away.
Yeah.
And it might be interesting to hear from other communities how enforcement has gone through as well. Some of the ones that have passed it and have had it in operation, how successful have they been? That's information that could be interesting. And the other question would be, have we heard from any of our legislators on this topic? This seems to be something that might be pursued at the state level.
Would make some sense, wouldn't it?
So, I think there's a variety of topics that bear learning more about here.
Yes.
Does the state
But-
do ABC investigations? So are they going to be willing to investigate based on our ordinance, making the Rule 21?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
ABC, whether they would.
I'm sorry, I've tried to fix my microphone issue. So ABC investigates through the state, right? Not through the city. Alcohol, tobacco, and so would they be willing to enforce an ordinance requiring an individual to be 21? So enforcement would be a question.
No, if we had a local ordinance, it would be up to we'd have to designate local enforcement folks. So for the enforcement of our current smoking ban, that is enforced by city employees in the fire and medical department and prosecuted through our municipal court if it reaches that case. So the state would not enforce this for us. We'd have to set up that enforcement mechanism with our local law.
If you're ever wanting to be first in anything, for one day maybe we could talk about medical marijuana. If we really want to pick a
No,
court battle,
Well, this isn't a first. There's
let's put
numerous
a-
communities in Kansas that have already passed this, so we would not be a first. Again, I'm not saying we should pass an ordinance. I want a discussion, that's all I want. That's it. So.
Well, I think I'd be okay with having that discussion on a work session sometime after we get more information about, these other court cases.
Would you give me direction to that effect?
We currently have a motion.
Okay, there's no second to this motion at this point.
No. To put it on a work session, yes.
Well, I'll second it.
Okay.
So we have a motion from Vice Mayor Larson, second from Mayor Boley, to put this on a work session to be determined later. I think
That's fine.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Other commission items?
I'll bring up medical marijuana another time.
Okay.
Hey, I'm
Thanks.
with you there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, city manager's report.
Okay, yesterday, April 2nd, the University of Kansas announced the launch date, Wednesday, April 18th, for a new bike share program at KU campus. Knowing these bikes will not remain on campus only, will be used to travel throughout the community, the city is in talks with KU on a plan of action to protectively address concerns and potential issues. The bike share is a one-year pilot program at no cost to the city or KU. The operational costs in this program are the responsibility of the vendor. The plan is to start with 180 bikes, with some of the bikes placed around Lawrence at designated locations for community use. The pricing structure provides options, including monthly and annual bike share packages, as well as ride-as-you-go pricing. Strategic plan webpage was updated. The strategic plan has undergone a major update format, and so you can see that on our webpage. Compost facility located at 1420 East 11th Street is now open to the public on Saturdays through mid-December from 9 to 3 p.m. I encourage folks that are interested to look at the cost associated with taking and dropping materials as well. Earth Day Parade and celebration is Saturday, April 21st. The 18th annual Earth Day celebration in South Park, hosted by the City Solid Waste Division, will be held from 11:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturday, April 21st. There's a parade hosted by KU Environs at 11 a.m. on Mass Street from 8th to South Park. Electronic recycling, the spring electronic recycling event will be held at the KU Park and Ride East parking lot, accessible from Clinton Parkway and Crestline Drive on Saturday, May 19th from 9 to 1 p.m. There's no recycling fee for electronic equipment except for CRT televisions, $20 for television 19 and under, and $40 for television 20 and over. Request by local high school students, I think we are, in terms of the moving the tobacco purchase age from 18 to 21, I think we've probably already covered that well enough. Downtown solid waste rate structure. City staff plans to solicit proposals for a firm to analyze and refine the downtown rate structure. Approximately 9.5 blocks downtown area have a unique rate structure based on square footage and use, due to the space constrictions and need to provide shared containers in the downtown. The model for the downtown area has not been revised since at least 1978. Staff has identified several flaws inherent in the current model. Further, staff has identified inconsistencies in the application of the model. Initial errors found were corrected, and more comprehensive efforts were undertaken to review the accounts. Given the number of businesses downtown who may be impacted by higher bills and the awareness of the limitations of the current model, staff plans to undertake phase one of the rate study. I'm going to give you a little bit more information that was included in the report. Approximately 150 of the 191 businesses audited are being charged at incorrect rates, almost all lower than the rates that should have been applied under the model. The errors have likely accumulated over a period of number of years, so that there's no misunderstanding that this isn't a finance department issue. I'm pointing a finger. Actually, Public Works identified points where the internal process was breaking down and established procedures to eliminate the possibilities for future errors. In the spirit of full transparency, the Public Works Department is responsible for auditing downtown rates and acknowledges the burden of the errors is the Public Works Administration's responsibility. So I appreciate them standing up and taking responsibility and accountability for it. GFOA Distinguished Budget Presentation Award received for 2018. Received the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from the GFOA for the 2018 budget book. Another thing that we will be reporting out, some of you may have heard that Crystal Miles, our forester, received an acknowledgement, an award, a statewide award, and it was a surprise to her, so we didn't put it on this so that she didn't get advance notice of that, so we'll put it on a subsequent meeting and we'll recognize her then. Future agendas, public hearing, and on 4/17/18, we have public hearings on alcohol ordinances for Final Friday events, Busker Festival, Hot Rod Hullabaloo events, and public hearing for 1655 Mississippi landmark designation, public hearing on Presbyterian Manor for IRBs, and receive the Transportation 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Future work sessions, we have a busy one next week. April 10th. We'll be discussing downtown cameras. The Transportation Commission will be we'll have a joint meeting kind of conversation there. And then we'll talk about the proposed merger of Public Works and Utilities Departments. Last week, Brandon McGuire and myself and the management of both the Utilities Department and the Public Works Department held 5 one-hour meetings with the employees of Utilities and Public Works Department to explain the merger discussion. And we will be talking to the management team this week, so we've done a lot of prep work in terms of explaining how this would all work. And it's now time to bring it forward publicly and show the commission publicly what the proposed merger looks like. So that will be next week as well. That's all I had.
Okay.
Any questions?
Public comment. Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
When do you think that the massage regulations will be coming back to us?
We're working on revisions right now, and we would like to have a revised draft that we can share with industry representatives by the end of April, and I've communicated with members of that group about that, with the thought that it would come back to the commission in May if they don't have serious concerns, which, we've communicated with them quite a bit. I don't expect that they will. We're trying to work really closely and come up with an ordinance that both groups feel comfortable with.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay. Calendar.
I needed to let everybody know that I'm going to be out of town on the 17th for a conference with the health department. So,
And I will be gone next week, so you'll get to preside at the work session.
Does that mean Jennifer is acting vice mayor?
I don't know.
And she's does that matter? I don't know.
I think that you should have the discussion and make a formal decision. That's what I think. I don't think.
We're actually, if there's 2 of us that are out, I think a commissioner can step up and help out. That's my take on it. But
Well, as a staff, we'd like to know who to go to.
okay. Well, I would.
If 2 are going to be.
Well,
2 aren't going to be gone.
We're not going to be. I mean,
Not at the same time.
I mean,
That's not what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I'll be gone the 10th.
Okay.
I'll be gone
And
the
Lisa will be
17th.
gone the 17th. So
Yeah,
we're, but I mean,
If I'm hearing that a conversation needs to be had about what happens when the mayor and the vice mayor are gone, I'm wondering if the more appropriate person to designate for that is the former mayor from the previous year.
This isn't what I was talking about. Wait a second. No, what I was.
let's put this on a work session, okay?
That's
What
another
I
work
was
session.
trying to get at is that,
We don't want to be
that,
first.
does it just, Stuart's gonna be gone, so we know that you'll be running the meeting.
Right.
Does that automatically make Jennifer acting vice mayor? That's what I was trying to ask.
Our code doesn't address that
No.
situation. It just talks about the mayor and the vice mayor.
Would there be a reason we'd need an acting vice mayor?
Right?
don't know.
That's what I don't think so.
This is just, if I was about to be on deck, I guess I would wanna know if I was in her
I
position.
agree with it.
Okay, well, I mean, if.
But I'm not on deck.
If there's
I
a
just
value
wanna
to having
make
an
that
acting
clear.
vice mayor,
I'm not on deck.
Okay, well, at the current time, one of us, the mayor, vice mayor, will be here. That's the plan, so we can,
I don't want that.
okay. So any other calendar items?
I have a ribbon cutting scheduled for the April 19th, I just noticed, and I'm going to be out of town that day, so I would appreciate some help with that from somebody. It's at 11:30.
April 19th?
Mm-hmm.
Wait a second, I think I might be able to take that.
And I believe that I responded that I might as well, but if Matthew can take it, I have MPO that afternoon, so
Oh,
Yes,
I will too, actually, but I
But
have.
it's not until
I have
3. It's
not
BTVC
till
board
3.
meeting that morning, though, and I don't know how.
So I'm willing to be on deck for that
Okay.
one.
Okay.
All right.
11:30, you said?
19th, on 19th, it's for the Communities in School of Mid-America. Thank you for doing that.
I'm hoping to be in the Earth Day Parade on the 21st.
I will be in that also, yes.
I will be in the audience of that.
Okay, so maybe we ought to get that on our calendar. Tony will remind us that we just need to talk about
Earth Day.
Floats. Not even Earth Day, that could be
Well,
Is that a costumed event?
something like that, yeah.
Costume.
For
Kind of
Stuart,
depends.
for Stuart mostly, the rest of us will be.
yeah, I'll let him know. Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
And I meant to mention last week, and we approved on the consent agenda, but I will be attending on the 20th and 21st of April, the Kansas League of Municipalities, newly elected, and other conference in Topeka.
Good.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
Move to adjourn?
There you go. We have a motion from Commissioner Ananda, second Commissioner Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.